Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for week 11 of Summer to Evolve. I'll be hosting this week's session. Morgan Llewellyn is my name, and I am the Chief Data Scientist at Jobvite. Today, we've got a couple of really great people to talk with today. We've got Ben Eubanks. He's the principal at Lighthouse, and if you haven't picked up Ben's book on AI and HR, I highly recommend giving that a read. It's absolutely fantastic. And we've also got Paul Roetzer. He's the founder of the Marketing AI Institute, and just a phenomenal AI expert, and really has been in this community for a long time, particularly on the marketing side. And so just really interested in bringing these two groups together, best practices that we've seen in marketing and best practices that we've seen in talent acquisition. So really excited today to talk about AI and talent acquisition. Just a reminder, right? Summer to Evolve. This is a 12-week session. We're in week 11, so almost done. We got that light at the end of the tunnel. We'll flash the URL where you can learn more at the end of this session. Here you can see what the 12 weeks have been all about, right? And we're in week 11 where we're AI and recruiting. Next week, we got another topic near and dear to my heart around analytics, right? How to use that data, how to do some great reporting and analytics with what you have. Just a little bit of insight into what's already occurred earlier in the week and what's yet to come. Tomorrow we've got a great demo day, something I'm personally very excited about, where we'll be talking about artificial intelligence in the Jobvite product and platform. In particular, we'll be talking about some candidate matching, which is really exciting. And then on Friday, we've got another great session where we'll be talking about metrics. And so, come back Thursday, come back Friday for some really great talent. And really great conversations. You can learn more about everything we're doing at thesummertoevolve.com, right? Great content in there, some great videos, great information, and go check it out. So with that, I will, let's get started, and let's bring up our first guest. We've got Ben Eubanks. Like I said, he's principal analyst over at Lighthouse Research. And if you haven't read his book, take a look at artificial intelligence for HR. Ben, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here, Morgan. It's going to be a good conversation. I appreciate you plugging the book. I tell everybody it sounds like the most dry, textbook material you can think of, but it's really a book about making work more human. So if someone wants to learn how to do that, some of the conversation we'll talk about today, I'm sure we'll wrap into some ideas that were shared there. And hey, I'm excited to be here, learn from Paul and the conversation too.
Yeah, so digging in just a little bit into some of your summer favorites. I was taking a look at this list of 5 items that you sent over, right, to keep it kind of light and summary, and just so many questions, right? So many questions. I feel like favorite vacation and favorite movie might blend a little bit for me. I'm a huge Chevy Chase National Lampoon's Vacation fan, and so I got to ask, in your road trip, right? Like, did you have any moments where like the wheels just fell off that Swiss Family Truckster?
Oh goodness, no wheels falling off. I will tell you that we have 4 kids age 10 and under, and so we actually rented a 16-passenger van to be able to get everybody around that monster road trip, and we just needed space to put everybody in their own respective places. And yeah, so that was a ton of fun. Thankfully, there were no technical issues with that. That would have been crazy, but it meant that my wife would not touch the driver's steering wheel, because she's like, this thing is way too big and scary for me. So I got saddled with the entire driving regimen for that one.
Well, thank you for that. And let's move on to Paul. Let's bring up Paul now.
I'm here.
Go ahead and say it. Yeah. So we've got Paul Roetzer. He's the founder and CEO of PR 2020. Right, and has really been in the AI and data science space for a really long time, right? Not to make you sound too long in the tooth or anything like that, Paul, but just a real expert. And so, kind of coming back to you and taking a look at these summer favorites, I gotta wonder, right? You're in the Ohio area, or is that correct?
Yes, we're in Cleveland, Ohio.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Major League, that's about the Cleveland Indians, correct?
It is. That's the summer favorite. I was racking my brain trying to figure out what was a summer favorite movie I have, and then I realized that's probably like the classic summer favorite. You can always watch it; it
Yeah.
never gets old.
Yeah. So is that one that you will go out and search for, or when it's on, you just find yourself getting absorbed into it?
Probably more. It's one of those like when it's on. It's kind of like Wedding Crashers. It's on every like Friday night on TNT. Or like you have to stop and watch it. So yeah, it's just it's one of those like you can duck in and out and just get like the highlight moments. You don't have to watch the whole movie, but you can just like remember the certain scenes that you love.
I'll never forget the first time my wife saw Major League. She's not a big fan of baseball, and she loved that movie. And I just couldn't, it just seemed like a disconnection, right? Like, it's just such a classic movie, and really anyone can appreciate it, right? Yeah, no, that's a great pick. Great pick.
And thus the stadium mustard too. It's got to be like Cleveland Stadium mustard on the hot dogs.
And just kind of wrapping up our intros. My name is Morgan Llewellyn, Chief Data Scientist here at Jobvite. And something interesting about me is I enjoy living in too many places, I suppose. I think I lost track around, once I hit, double digits on like major metropolitan areas. I just don't keep track. I just enjoy, I enjoy new places and new experiences. And so, geographical, temporality is something that I suffer from, but just really enjoy seeing new people. Before we get started, just to remind folks, you can submit questions, right? So feel free to submit questions. We'll try and get to them, live as we're going, or we'll vacuum them up at the end before we sign off. Any sort of social, if you want to make some social posts, use the hashtag Jobvite S2E, Summer to Evolve. Feel free to post that on any of your social channels. And we are recording this, and it will be available, again, if you go to thesummertoevolve.com. Okay, with that, I think we've completed our intros, and we can kind of get into the thick of it. So where I thought would be a fun place to start is, kind of dipping that toe in AI and getting everyone up to speed and kind of familiar with the different angles that we're approaching AI and data science. And so, Paul, you've been in this space so long. Can you give, for maybe those people out there who are still trying to understand what is AI? It's such a broad term. It's used in so many different ways and contexts and industry. Can you give kind of that gentle introduction about when we say AI, what are we talking about? What do we mean? Where does it apply?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand why I've been in this space for about a decade now in terms of my own research on AI and trying to find applications of it. I'm a liberal arts major. I mean, I was a journalism student. So I'm not the PhD data scientist. I'm not a machine learning engineer. I have no technical ability to build any AI myself. So I actually came at this as an average marketer trying to understand how is whatever this technology is. So back in 2011, when IBM Watson won on Jeopardy, that to me was wait, what is that? Can that predict what I should do with marketing dollars? Can that predict strategy? Can it predict outcomes? And that was my original interest in AI, is what is this technology and how could I apply it to marketing? So for years, I struggled to find a definition of AI that made sense to me as a non-technical person. And I really struggled to understand it and to be able to explain it to other people. So the definition I always default to, because of its simplicity, is actually from Demis Hassabis, who is the founder of DeepMind, which was acquired by Google back in, I think, 2016. And he defines AI as the science of making machines smart. What that means is machines inherently, and machines meaning like hardware, software kind of together, they don't know how to do anything on their own. Everything we do as, in the recruiting industry, in my world, in the marketing industry, it's human powered. So the human creates the software And then the other human, the recruiter, the marketer, tells the software what to do. The software doesn't send its own emails. It doesn't write its own emails. It doesn't know when to post on social. It doesn't know how to spend ad dollars. Like, it doesn't know any of that stuff. And it doesn't get smarter. With AI, it can actually learn and improve. And the two main ways that's realized is through giving it human-like abilities, largely of language and vision, are the two primary types of AI that's created, and then the ability to predict outcomes. And that's where machine learning comes in, which is the subset of AI you hear the most about. Machine learning is literally taking data in and making predictions about future outcomes. But the difference than a normal data science scenario is it can actually learn and improve the predictions on its own. So predicting the best candidate, predicting the likelihood someone may leave a job, predicting the likelihood they may be a candidate and they don't even know it yet. All of these ways that AI could find its way in, it's either making a prediction or it's generating or understanding language or using like computer vision. So we just think of AI as this umbrella term of tools and technologies that make machines and therefore processes smart.
What a great definition. And there's a word I want to pick out from there, because I think it speaks to something that I know Ben cares a lot about, and that I care a lot about as well. And that's that word human, right? And how does humanity, right? How does humanity and AI kind of coexist and evolve together? I like to take the position that AI can actually make us more human, right? And it's not an either or type question. But let me throw it over to Ben. And Ben, what when you look at AI and when you look at it in the context of talent acquisition in particular, where do you see, if you can distill that definition and kind of apply it to some of the context and the use cases you've seen, where do you see AI being applied and applied successfully and valuably? And then maybe we can kind of follow up on that context of human.
Absolutely. So one of the things it's fun, Paul, your background, your liberal arts education, I'm educated as an HR, business professional, and so I'm not a data scientist either. And so it's fun to come at it, because I think we come at it from the very practical lens of what is this actually doing? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? So to your question there, Morgan, some of the things that I see in the recruiting space, the people listening in, like this will be near and dear to your heart, the kind of things that machines can do to help us do this better, things like matching resumes with the jobs you're posting out there, trying to make sure that the words you're looking for, the phrases they're looking for, just like a human would, right? A really great recruiter can pick out keywords on a resume and look at things and say, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't actually in our job posting, but that's a key requirement for this job. And look, this person has it. Let's have a talk with them. AI can do that much better than we can. There's not a recruiter alive that wakes up in the morning that says, I can't wait to go and look at 500 resumes today. I'm so excited about that. But an algorithm can do that really, really easily. It's very simple for it because it's very structured and it can go down that path. The things that we are good at are very different from the things that machines are good at. To kind of riff off that human piece of that, Morgan, that you mentioned, we are good at building relationships. We're good at asking questions. We're good at being creative. We're good at collaborating and working together, critical thinking, those things that machines, it's really hard to program them to do that. You can program them to have some semblance of, like compassion. We can program a machine to care, but it doesn't actually care the same way we would. Sorry, I'm getting down a rabbit trail. Going back to some of the different use cases, talk about resumes. That's a great one. One of the other areas we're watching really closely is around screening. How do we look at this batch of candidates that have come in and not just using their resume, but using other things to evaluate them and figure out if they're going to be a high quality candidate? Do they match what a good candidate or what a good performer looks like in our company? Again, not looking at protected class or anything like that, but saying this is what it takes to be a high performer at our organization. They need to have these skills, these capabilities, these kind of behaviors, and then mapping those across and trying to match up the candidates that are coming in just to figure out if they're going to be the right fit for that. And like Paul said a minute ago, it's about teaching them the language piece, teaching computers the vision piece. We can only see so much. We can only perceive so much. If I was reading these things or watching, I can only see certain things, but we can program a computer to see so much more than we can. And it can capture all that data and crunch it and help us to figure out what steps we should take next.
Yeah, no, those are great use cases, great applications. And again, I think we we really want to dive in on this concept of human, right? Either today or in another, in another episode. But it really is just so so core to the future of AI is how humanity and our our human nature gets intertwined with AI. But if I can take a step back and come back to Paul, right? So we know what AI is. We've got some use cases, right? Paul, right, over the past decade, we've been seeing, just this AI hype machine, right? Just all this interest and hype around AI. Why is there the hype? Why are people talking about AI? Why are, if you're talking and looking at new TA tools and that type of thing, why is AI being brought into the conversation? What's the hype all about? I guess, and Ben, if you want to kind of riff off that and talk about that hype in particular with TA, right? And where does that hype really live and deliver?
So the key for everybody is AI isn't new. It actually goes back to like the 1950s, where the theories of teaching machines to do human-like things was happening. The challenge through the decades and why you hear these things about like AI winters was because oftentimes there was a lack of computing power and a lack of data to actually get the machines to do the things we thought they were capable of doing. And we don't lack either of those things these days. There's more data than any of us knows what to do with, and computing power is insane. So, and especially the ability to process things in the cloud. So Google and Amazon have massive cloud businesses which enable AI computing. And so because the two main barriers to actually applying technology to build it smarter are no longer there, it's now becoming much more readily available. And if you think about, like, Amazon has a division dedicated to AI, Google AI exists, Microsoft AI exists, and there are thousands of people at these massive companies that we all rely on focused on the development and application of AI. So the main reason we're now seeing it everywhere is because now the big tech companies are able to do it at scale and thereby, make it more readily available to the average enterprise to do it at scale as well.
I love a couple of things you said in there, and they resonate so much with my my personal experience, right? In that, the first thing, you're right, AI isn't new, right? Machine learning is not new. None of this is new. These books were written long ago for the algorithms that are popular today, right? One of the things that has changed, and this is something I've seen in my lifetime, is that availability of data. Right. I used to joke, right. In my background, right, in grad school, we used to bleed for data, right. And trying to get your hands on more data to be able to do things was really, kind of your make or break. Could you get the data? Now that coin is just completely flipped on its head. You don't need to bleed for data anymore. And the compute, right, and you don't have to bleed for compute. Just really, kind of those massive advancements in the availability of resources. On that note, Ben, right? So when we talk about the hype, when we talk about those use cases, I mean, what do you see as far as AI goes, right? Like where does the rubber meet the road? And if you were an organization looking to leverage AI, where would you look? Where do you see mature products and spaces to be applying AI in talent acquisition and in HR in general?
I was going to say, in HR broadly, so when I did all the research for the book about 2 years ago, the thing that I quickly realized was there were a lot more use cases in talent acquisition, a lot more opportunities to leverage it because there's a lot of volume there. There's also a ton of data. There's so many more candidates that are applying and so many more resumes there. We actually have people inside the business typically, and so that gives us a chance to use all that data to try to hopefully sift through and leverage from the algorithms and the power they bring. There are some applications in HR. They're not quite as robust. I'll say robust. They're not quite as mature as what we see on the TA side. So usually when I'm talking to employers, the things that they are coming to me asking about are some of the stuff I talked about earlier, like the low-hanging fruits. Like, we need some chatbots to have conversations with people who are showing up on our website. We need to be able to do this matching and screening. We need a tool that will help us scour these 8 different databases we have a license to, so we can find the right candidates without having to do 8 different types of searches and things like that. I've seen some amazing use cases of companies saving tons of money, saving tons of time, hiring better, more diverse candidates, hiring faster, like all the outcomes that you bled for data, that recruiters will bleed for those kind of outcomes. They want to report back on those. And it's been a lot of fun to see those kind of things becoming more and more prevalent as these tools become more commonplace and more companies start adopting them, start trying them out, start really evaluating what they can bring. And what's been fun to see, and this isn't something new in this space, around AI, but it's fun to see it continue to evolve, in keeping with our theme for the summer, is when someone starts using a piece of technology that has AI in it, and they're like, okay, we just need to solve this problem over here. And once they get to where they solve that problem, they're happy with the result, they realize, hey, wait a minute, might also apply that to this other use case over here. So I mentioned using chatbots to take resumes from candidates. When that first started happening, and when we first started talking to companies about chatbots, I was kind of skeptical. And I said, how is that really a better experience? And during the research for that, I actually talked to a company, and they said, you know what? As candidates are going through this process, they're getting their resume taken from a chatbot. They're not actually applying on the website. It's a little different experience for them. But 75% of those candidates are saying thank you to that bot at the end of the experience because they feel different, right? And it's hard to quantify that feeling, how it feels different and how it feels better, more engaging. But I think that's one of the things that's kind of fun to watch as we start to look at people, look at the audience we're serving, look at how we can, we said it a couple of times, make this process more human, make more connected to those individuals, because often in the recruiting process, the biggest thing we hear, the pain point from the candidates is, I don't get to talk to anybody. I don't get an interaction. And those kind of tools can help us to be a little bit more, even though it's not an actual human touch, it feels like a human touch for them.
One thing I would add,
Yeah.
Morgan,
Oh,
is
please.
just like this is for years with marketing where we struggled. It's like to really understand what AI is and how it works, the use cases is the answer. Like you have to just see a list of all these ways, and by understanding the basic premise of what AI is capable of, you can then actually start to come up with your own ways to apply it. So the way we always guide people is think about all the things you do in a day, a week, a month, and the litmus test is it data driven or should it be data driven? We often make decisions that should be data driven, but we don't analyze the data. Is it repetitive? So is it a process that can be defined that you do over and over and over again? And is it requiring you to make a prediction? Now, all of those, you may never sit there and think, here's my 10 tasks. Wow, these are really data-driven, repetitive, predictive tasks. You don't think about tasks that way. But when you step back and you make a list, like in my marketing world, when I send an email campaign, I'm trying to predict what is the best time to send it. What should the headline be? Should it have an emoji in it? Like I'm trying to predict open rates at first. Then from there, I'm trying to predict click rates and conversions. And to do that, I'm trying to predict what image to use, what color to use, what font to use, what CTA to include, how long to make it. Every one of these decisions I make subconsciously is actually a prediction that should be based on historical data. That's the kind of thing where you start to look at each thing, whether, my world is email or social or advertising. I realize everything we do is making a prediction in some way about human behavior or some outcome or some goal. And so I'm of the belief that in the marketing industry, at least 80% of what we do every day will be intelligently automated to some degree in the next 5 years, meaning the machine will help us do some part of it. They won't replace the human, they won't replace the task, but it'll actually take that data-driven repetitive burden off of the human. So to your point, the human can actually be more human. Like they can go back to creativity and empathy and relationship building and intuition and like not giving machines that stuff. And so I think, again, you don't have to come out of this understanding AI and being able to go explain it to a friend. What you want in this, if this is your first time really sitting down and thinking about AI, is to come out with like, I think I get it. I think I understand why people talk about this. I think I understand the basic premise of how it can be used. And if you can just get to that stage, then you can more realistically look at your own workload or your own schedule, your team schedule, and start thinking, yeah, I could start to see where machines could help.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And let's unpack that a little bit, right? So 100% agree, right? Like you're right on the nose when it comes to how does AI make us more human, right? Like get rid of those repetitive tasks that, to what Ben said earlier, right? No one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to go and do some mindless button clicking, right? We've got 100 more features now, right? And now we got to integrate all these features, and we've got to click buttons for every feature. Where can AI take some of that, repetitive burden off of our plates? But yeah, let's dive in and really talk about that buyer journey, right? Or really that customer journey, and understanding when should AI come into the conversation? How do people educate themselves? And how do you approach AI in a conversation? And a lot of people might be thinking, oh well, we got marketing on here. Well, think of Paul as, you've been through this, right? You've been through this buyer journey for the past decade of understanding how do you bring AI into the process? How do you bring it into the product? So can you share a little bit more of how do you take that bite? How do you understand where AI fits?
Yeah, so the thing we always guide people, and this is agnostic of industry, is you start with pilot projects. So I mean, you're not going to just flip a switch and make AI infused into everything you're doing. You go to that list of the things you're doing all the time, and you try and prioritize, like, all right, I'm spending 40 hours a month doing this thing. That's definitely repetitive. It's like the same, 7 steps every day over and over again. Or I'm, spending 30 hours doing this, or whatever it is. And you say, okay, now I'm just going to go Google search AI for resume review, or AI, and go find a tool, because the key with AI is it has to be built to do very narrow tasks. There's no such thing as general AI that replaces a role that has multiple outcomes that need to be achieved. So it's trained to do a very specific thing, just like we do very tactical things every day as professionals. And so if you can identify all those tactical things and find AI for X, there's a decent chance, at least within the marketing industry, that someone has built a tool to do that thing, because there's a pretty good chance other people also spend 40 hours a month of their time doing that thing. And so like resume review, like you can use what's called content extraction, which can actually go, like natural language processing understands the words, and then content extraction can actually extract key phrases or words within it. And you can actually also use it to do sentiment analysis. You can get a sense of someone's writing style. Like there's all these things you can learn from that piece of paper that's one dimensional, that again, even a good recruiter, you have to spend a lot of time to extract insights from a resume. The machine can be trained to extract all those things you would do and more instantaneously across hundreds of them. And so that, yeah, I think that the way to start is think about the things you're doing all the time, and find 1 or 2 pilot projects to run where the probability of, like, if this works, this is going to save me a bunch of time. Like this would be huge. And then you build your confidence in AI through these very approachable projects versus trying to tackle what is honestly a very abstract thing for the average professional to try and understand and build.
Can I tell a quick story, Morgan?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I was coming back to you. So yeah, go ahead.
So there was an event, there's a recruiting event a couple years ago called SourceCon, and they had this challenge called the Grandmaster Challenge to try to figure out who could recruit better, recruiters or an algorithm. And the contest involved downloading a batch of a couple thousand resumes, and they had 3 job descriptions. You had to figure out for those job descriptions which people were interviewed and hired. And so again, human power, raw human power, not easy to do, going through and filtering and searching. And so they ran this contest, and drum roll, the humans won. A gentleman named Randy Bailey. He's actually a sourcer at Walmart.
That story kills me. Like on the inside, I die just a little bit when I hear it.
He got all 3 correct out of a couple thousand resumes. A pair of people came in second with a couple correct guesses, but not all. The algorithm came in third, and everyone else came in after that. And so when I talked to Randy, I was asking him how long it took to actually get his answers for this. He said, 30 to 40 hours, a lot of crunching and backing into it, double checking and triple checking. The algorithm took less than 5 seconds to get its predictions for that. And the question I always pose when I tell that story is, so who actually won? Right. Randy was correct, but it took him 30 hours. The algorithm was almost right, but it took 5 seconds. And like you were saying, Paul, right? Let's let the algorithm do all that heavy lifting, and then let's come in with our creativity, our experience, our ingenuity, and figure out, okay, let's tip this here, let's adjust that there, and this will give us the right solution without having to spend all of that time, all that effort, and we get to spend that time on something else that's more valuable, more useful, more relevant to the business. So I love that one because it illustrates that it's not an either or question, it's an and kind of solution.
Well, and there's the thing people have to realize, like, the human is not in the loop. Like, even in that scenario, if that was a real situation, Randy would still oversee what the machine was recommending. Like, the machine's not going to go hire the people. So, he's still going to take the information in, take the 5 seconds of work, and then spend 3 hours reviewing what the machine has recommended instead of the original 30 to do the initial assessment.
Yes.
That's the human and machine element, which is the opportunity for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, guys, love those stories. I couldn't say it better myself. So Ben, when should AI come into the conversation, right? So when should we be talking about AI? Are we at the point where if we're not talking about it today in our organization, we're behind? Like, what are the tipping points that should be leading to those AI conversations?
So there's a couple.
And I guess going one step further is, where do you think that first conversation typically will be around?
Well, I was going to say, one of the stories that pops in my head, I have a good friend. He's the head of TA for a major international organization, and the chief digital officer came to him a few months ago and said, "Hey, we need to get some AI." That's a quote. "We need to get some AI." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's, "Well, I saw in the news that our competitor is using this cool screening thing. It uses artificial intelligence. We should be using something like that." It's like, whoa, tell me what you want specifically. What outcomes do you want? "Well, I want us to be able to do this and this and this." And says, "Okay, I'll come back to you." And he went away and talked to his team, came back and said, "Hey, we actually can do that. We just need one more headcount and we're done." Right? We can go and look, we can do the whole process. We can search for a tool, we can do RFP, we can do all that fun stuff, or we can just hire a part-time person on our team and solve that problem. So it comes back to, again, Paul and I have been like beating on this pretty hard, but it comes back to those real use cases. If someone comes to you and says, "Hey, we've got AI," you need to slow down a little bit. Let's talk about what that does, what problems it's solving, make sure it's an issue that you're actually dealing with as an organization, as a recruiting team. That's what you need to focus on. One other thing, though, in this conversation, and again, Paul and I have said this a couple of times, so hopefully you walk away with a couple of big takeaways we keep repeating, but no one expects you to be a programmer, a data scientist, a person who can, understands all the ins and outs of it. What I see is the role for an HR or talent pro in this bigger conversation. If you do decide, hey, we do need to get something that has some machine learning in it because we're trying to process a lot of data and we get better and smarter at that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But your role in that whole conversation is to make sure the things that you're talking to your vendor about, make sure the things that they're considering, the signals that algorithm is looking at, are things that are okay from an HR and recruiting standpoint. I talked to a company last year that said that they were looking at this tool to predict who's going to be a high-performing employee. And when they asked the vendor to kind of show what signals it was looking at the names of the people, where they lived, and those are all big red flags because that can indicate someone's gender, their race, their socioeconomic status. All the red flags go up for us as talent pros, but for the people who are building that, they're like, "Oh, those are great predictors. Look, it's recommending these things." So that's where I see your role is. When you have a frank conversation with someone, you don't have to know all the ins and outs of how it works, but when they start telling you the signals, the factors, the things that's weighing to help you make those choices, make sure it's things that you can actually evaluate, and don't be afraid to push back a little when someone's like, "Oh, it's proprietary." Well, your job is on the line. Your company's in the headlines if you're making their own choices, and so push back. Don't be afraid to have some courage there.
And I think that's a great point. And it comes back to this, how much does someone need to know, right? And you're exactly right. You don't have to be that expert, but AI in the TA and HR space is a little bit different, right? Because when we're talking about bias, right? When we're talking about algorithm bias, we're really, we're not just talking about a mathematical concept. We're talking about diversity and inclusion, right? And now that use case, the real world, and that machine learning, that AI world, they're starting to come together, and implications in one really impact the other. And recognizing that, and I think leading with transparency on that AI front is just so key and critical. But those are lovely, really really solid points. So I guess would you characterize that responsibility for the use case, right? Is that really on the organization, on the HR, on the recruiter to really own that use case, or should the vendors be bringing that?
Paul's suggestion was tremendous, where he said, start looking at what your week looks like, your month looks like. You know, don't forget those tasks you do once a month that take you a whole day because it's a pain in the rear, right? Start looking at those kinds of things and really trying to codify that a little bit. So if you do go out and start having a conversation, or if you get a phone call from someone that's trying to talk to you, you have those use cases, you know what they are. If someone says, we want to help you with your recruiting, that's really broad and it's pretty vague. It's hard to get down to the actual pain point. If your biggest issue is you have people quitting in the first 30 days on the job, and someone calls you and says, hey, we have the tool using machine learning to predict a long-term hire, you're like, whoa, let's talk about that, because that's an issue that we have. So get clear on your issues and problems. And then when you hear that story that resonates, that matches with those kind of things that you're trying to solve for, it will sound that much sweeter, and it will be a better conversation you're actually prepared for. It's much harder to show up and not know what the use cases are, and then let someone else kind of feed you, because you might be swayed by the flashy thing versus the thing that actually solves the real nuts and bolts problem that you have. I don't know if that same thing applies, Paul, in like the marketing space or not, but I loved your suggestion on really getting clear on what your issues are, what your pain points are, so you can map that out and use that as your guide for what you need.
Yeah, I mean, generally it's still early. I think, Morgan, you referred earlier to, are we behind? Like if we haven't figured this out yet, we don't understand, are we behind? No, like you're not. Like even in marketing, which likely has, again, I don't know the technology space as well in your space in terms of how much money is going, but we're talking about billions of dollars have gone into marketing automation that has zero AI in it. And there's major publicly traded companies that are still trying to figure AI out in our space. So we're very early in the understanding and adoption of it, generally speaking, in the business world, and certainly very specifically in marketing, I would assume, in HR and TA as well. So the whole key with today's session, I think, is to try and give you confidence to maybe be a little more proactive in seeking technology. But the way I always tell it to people is you're just still buying technology. You just want smarter technology. So if the companies you work with don't at least have a roadmap or a point of view on AI, if they're not even to the point where they're talking about it, then it's probably not going to be the best solution 3 years from now for you. So again, you don't have to like have machine learning and everything, and you don't have to see natural language processing talked about in everywhere where language exists. Like that's not the point here. The point is we're still buying technology. You still have to solve problems. You still have to produce outcomes. There may just be much smarter, more efficient ways to achieve those outcomes with the right technology. And that means a mix of, they have an engineering team dedicated to this stuff. A lot of software vendors nowadays are like building AI labs even within, are building out their data science teams where they're bringing in more expertise with AI capabilities. There's a public point of view. There's things like Jobvite with education around it. Like they're starting to talk about it and prepare the market for this kind of stuff. And you're going to want to align with companies that are doing that, because if they're not even talking about it yet, then there's a chance they haven't figured out their play yet, and that's a problem. Like the software companies may be getting behind their competitors if they're not proactively building these capabilities, but as a buyer, you're not behind your peer group yet. You're actually still have an opportunity to be proactive and get out ahead of your peer group, I would say.
That's a wonderful takeaway. I think the importance of having that roadmap, right, and understanding what does the future look like. You're exactly right. We're early on in this journey, right, and being able to forecast out what do we want things to look like in 3-5 years. That's really key. It's not it's not just a series of quick wins. It's that grander vision of how these things fit together. I think that's really important and just a really thoughtful and profound statement. We've got a couple of minutes left. Just want to throw it to you guys to kind of give some closing statements or closing thoughts. Anything we haven't touched on. Ben, is there something kind of burning in your belly that we haven't touched on that you wish we had?
I would have loved to have gone deeper on the bias thing, because I think that's one of the first things we hear and worry about, right? It's so hard. With limited time, we need another conversation. It's hard to go deep into that.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, man, but I hear you, right? Like I'm looking at it, and if we had brought it up at the first minute, we would have talked about it for the next 45,
I
right?
know. I
It's
know.
just such an important, yeah, it's so important. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
It's one of those things that just pops up though. When you start discussing, one of the first pushbacks people have, one of the first things people hear about that, hey, I've read the news, bad things are coming, right? And I would have liked to have educated a little more on that. Take some time, do a little bit of reading on it. Again, I've heard there's a book out there you can check out. The publisher would appreciate me saying that. But bias is a part of this bigger conversation. Just again, start educating yourself a little bit on that piece, just because it does affect the work we do. We are the ones on the hook for that as the HR leaders in the business, as recruiting leaders in the business. And so I would encourage you to take a little bit of time, do a little reading on that. There's a lot of good data out there on the topic, and I think that's the only part of the conversation we didn't really cover. I think everybody else is going to walk away hopefully today with some good takeaways and ideas on how to be more comfortable, more confident when you talk to your leadership team, when you talk to your peers out in the space about what AI is and how it can help you as a recruiter.
Yeah, that's spot on. Paul, any thoughts or any kind of closing statements?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I would not be intimidated by the topic. It seems so abstract, but take it from, a liberal arts major. It's not. Like, once you actually unpack it and you realize it's just technology, it's just a smarter way to do things that drives efficiency and accelerates revenue. Like, is a very few things that it actually, enables you to do. And if you understand those basic fundamentals, you can create a pretty significant competitive advantage for yourself and for your company by understanding this stuff and seeking out better solutions. And I think that's always my takeaway for everybody is just get past the fear factor. It's not replacing you. It's not, it's not this crazy thing you see in sci-fi movies. It's actually just a better way to do repetitive tasks that can free you up to do stuff you enjoy more than analyzing spreadsheets and data if you're not a cheap data scientist. So that would be my thing, is just to take that next step, go learn a little bit more and challenge yourself to be the one in your company that takes the lead on this stuff.
Guys, our time has come to an end. I can't thank you both enough. Ben Eubanks, Paul Roetzer. If you guys don't, if you're not connected to them on social media, highly recommend it. Really great thought coming out of both these individuals. And so I follow them on LinkedIn personally. I think they do, really great content and thought pieces. So highly recommend following them. Just kind of finishing up here. We've got, again, coming in the week, we've got our demo day tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about some candidate matching and some of the other really cool and useful functionality, or should I say use cases, right? That deliver on the value of artificial intelligence and automation. And then we've got a great speaker in she'll be speaking on Friday. Recruiter Real Talk, where she's going to be talking about hiring metrics. So just to kind of close out here, everything will be available later on thesummertoevolve.com, so check us out. Again, I want to thank both of our presenters today, Paul Eubanks, sorry, Paul Roetzer and Ben Eubanks. Absolutely fantastic talking with you guys, and can't wait to do this again. All right, thank you, everyone.